And we're back. Most people think they're bad with money. They think, I should have saved more. I should have had made that decision. I just need to be more disciplined. But what if that's not the truth? What if the problem isn't you? What if the system was never designed for you to win in the first place? Think about it. For the moment you start making money, you're dropped into a world full of complexity. Credit scores you don't fully understand, loan terms written in a language nobody teaches you, processes that feel overwhelming, even when you're doing everything right. And then we blame people. We say they made a bad financial decision. They bought too much house. They didn't read the fine print. But here may be the uncomfortable truth. Smart people make bad decisions every single day. Not because they're careless, but because the system is designed in a way that almost guarantees confusion, especially when it comes to something as big as buying a home. I've seen it personally. People walk into one of the biggest financial decisions of their life, excited, hopeful, ready to level up, and somewhere in the process, they get overwhelmed, they get pressured, they get lost. Not because they're not intelligent, but because the process itself is broken. But when the information is complex, when incentives aren't aligned, when emotions are high and clarity is low, even the smartest person in the room can make the wrong move. So today we're asking a different question. Not how do we people stop making bad decisions, but why are the systems around us making it so easy to fail? Because if we can understand that, we don't just make better decisions, we take control. And let's get into it. Today, I am joined by Dr. Dan Norman. Hi, Dan.
Don.
Don
Norman. Just call me Don, please.
Will. How you doing, Don?
Good. Your story reminds me of some friends of mine who always made bad decisions. They just couldn't make it. But what they did is they made it into their livelihood to find people who made bad decisions and figure it out. And they just got the Nobel Prize for doing that work. And it's interesting because the kind of errors that they found other people making, they themselves keep making, even though they know better. And it's as you point out, you don't have all the information. You're often in a rush. It often sounds good. And you don't do the right kind of homework.
Do you believe financial mistakes are mainly personal failures or design failures?
Oh, they're design failures. Absolutely. They're personal failures in a sense because you don't know enough, but the system is designed so they're so complex. Nobody knows enough. Well, computers do.
Is the computer now the new ace in the hole, so to speak? Is that the new trump card that we can take advantage of?
I think it is. I just heard a story from somebody who said he had signed a lease. He was renting a workspace, and he got the lease, and he said, "Oh yeah, that looks good." And then he said to himself, "I wonder. I'm going to feed it into Claude, which is the name of the AI system he uses. It's Anthropic, and see what it says." And Claude said, "Here, you should worry about this. This statement isn't right." He said it found 3 or 4 different things that he never would have thought of. And because of Claude, he was able to change it and go back and say, "Hey, look, I don't want this."
Wow, that's incredible. At what point in your life, career, did you kind of recognize that it really was the system and not people?
That's my career. So I write books, among other things. So I wrote this book,
The Design of Everyday Things.
And one of the reasons I wrote it was I wanted to say, it's not your fault. It's bad design. And I remember I was we had rented a home. My wife and I, we'd gone to England for a while and we rented a home there. And then one day the owner of the home came by and said, "I'm sorry, but I need a file in the filing cabinet. Can I come in and get it?" So sure. So she came in and went to the filing cabinet and she couldn't open it. She went, oh, and then finally kicked it. And that caused it to open. And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I'm not very good at this stuff." And I said, "Why are you blaming yourself? That's a crappy filing cabinet." But people tend to blame themselves. And so part of what the whole book is, look, you know what I'm really famous for? I'm famous for lots of things, I thought, but I'm famous for doors you can't open. There's a video about me that's been watched 10, 15 million times. It's only about 6 minutes long, and they're called Norman doors. It's when you push and you're supposed to pull, or you pull, you're supposed to push, or you push and pull and you're supposed to slide it. And it's crazy. And you have to put a sign on the door that says push or pull. A door is about as simple a thing as you can imagine. Why do you need an instruction manual, a sign to know how to use it? So, I mean, there are lots of, I've watched people get stuck between two doors. You know, they get in and then there's another door they have to go through, and the other door they push it and it doesn't open, and they go back to the one they just came through and they can't open it either, and they go back and forth. It's not their fault. Just crappy design.
But, I'm curious to get your take on who benefits from this.
Nobody benefits. It wasn't done on purpose, usually. It's that people did it and weren't thinking about it and didn't think about the way it's used. And I claim that a lot of bad design is not bad design. It's that, look, an architect designs a house and a contractor builds it. And then the architect has decided where the rooms will be. And then they build it, and then they call in the electrician to wire it up and put in the light switches. And the electrician has no idea how you're going to use the house. And so they often put in light switches that make no sense, or they're in the wrong place or whatever. And it's nobody's fault. It's the fault that you really want somebody who understands what you're going to do, and they'll do a good job. I talk to electricians because I've actually had several houses constructed as I move around. And I've talked to electricians, and they say they do their best and they really hate it because they know that what they're doing is probably wrong, but they have no choice.
That's crazy. The electrician, obviously, in the trades, why do they have no choice? Because the way everything's
because they were just all they were doing is they were told to put in the switches. And again, I love to I love to go to auditoriums when I give talks and find the switch bank. And usually there will be about 10 switches in a row, and nobody knows what they do. So and because the electrician just, this is that row of lights, and this is that row of lights, and this is that row of lights. But why do you want that? And so what most people do is they turn them all on or they turn them all off. But again, whose fault is it? It's lack of communication.
I mean, sometimes obviously you hear the term like the man, or they're trying to get you and stuff like that. So, to some degree, you always feel like there's someone trying to get the upper hand, but it's really just the design.
Yeah, mostly this is not intentional. It's why would I make something that was really hard to use? Well, there's a couple of places where I want to do that. I might want to have a safe. I don't want people to be easy to open. I might even want to hide it so you can't find it. I want a secret panel that nobody knows about. But if you push this section of the wall, it opens up. That's okay. Games. Sometimes you make it hard deliberately because that's part of the challenge of the game. But in living your life, come on, look at the stove. There's fires that are occurred because people forgot to turn off or turned off the wrong burner. So you have 4 burners and they're in a rectangle, right? Mm-hmm. But the switches, the controls are in a straight line. So how do you know which burner it is? And every manufacturer has a different rule for doing it. Usually the left 2 controls are the left 2 burners, but which one's the top and which is the bottom?
Right.
And then the right are the top are the right ones. But it turns out the left ones, it might be the far left is the top, but and the right one, the left one is the bottom. And
I'm curious from a psychology perspective, the human brain, when you're overwhelmed with so many different choices, what happens to the brain?
When you
So
have
let
too
me,
many choices, there's
yeah.
actually
So what happens to the
a
brain when
friend
you're
of
over?
mine, my friend of mine once wrote a book about the tyranny of choice. When you have too many choices, you give up. A
Mm,
store comes. If you go to a store, you want to buy a shirt, and you pick up a shirt, and you say this isn't quite right, and the salesperson comes over to help you, and the salesperson says, you tell him what you want. The salesperson says, oh, and brings you 6 shirts. You know what you're going to do? You're going to walk out of the store. What you want the salesperson to do is bring you 1 or maybe give you 2. And then you can make a decision. But 6?
too many.
Too many.
Do you believe like sometimes in the sales aspect they preach urgency or act now? Why does that lead people to make bad decisions?
Because you think you're getting a bargain. And unless you make a quick decision, you are, you'll have to pay more money or it won't be available. And it may be something you really want, but if it's at all expensive and complex, you really need time to think about it. And this doesn't allow you the time. In fact, that's why we try to buy an automobile and you're told this offer is only good for the next hour or something,
Yeah.
which is nonsense. But it forces you to make a decision.
I
Well, or
mean,
either that or to walk out.
true. You're gonna make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just overall in your life. I mean, just life experience in general. I mean, what have you learned about systems and designs? I mean, like you said, I just want to, soak in as much knowledge as I can from you with our time. So, I mean, can you just reflect on just things that, from the human impact on systems and designs? Because we keep changing. It's forever evolving.
Yeah. That's actually a wonderful part about people. Look, let me give you my history quickly because it's relevant. I started off wanting to be an engineer. I wanted to build circuits because when I was born when I was about age of going to college, the electronics they're called vacuum tubes. Some of you will know, and some of you don't know what it is. It's way before transistors and the kind of circuits we have today. They were big, they got hot, they burned out, you had to replace them all the time. But what I loved about it, I would take things apart at home and I could understand them. But when I got to our home radio, I would take it apart and I couldn't figure out how it worked because it works through electrons and electrons are invisible. And I thought that was wonderful. So I decided to go to college and be an engineer and build things like this and learn how it worked. So I did. And I got my degree. And then I said, oh, I want to work with this new thing that's coming out. It's called a computer. I graduated from college in 1957. So the number of computers in the world was pretty limited. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where the very first computer had been built in the United States. And the people who built it weren't there anymore. And so what am I going to do? And just then the psychology department sort of changed and they got a new head of the psychology department who wasn't a psychologist. And I heard him give a talk and I said, oh, that's interesting. So I talked to him and he said, you don't know anything about psychology. And I said, yeah. He said, good. So that's how I became a psychologist. And so I started applying my engineering knowledge to psychology, which made me pretty unique. And because all these fields in the world, there are experts who know what's in their field, but they don't know what's in any other field. So if I take some elementary principle of electrical circuits and apply it to psychology, people say, how brilliant you are. I wasn't brilliant. I just took what everybody else thought was simple and easy and I put it in. But anyway, I ended up at the University of California in San Diego just as it started up. Nobody had graduated when I joined. And I remember one day I was talking to the chair of the department who had hired me. And we were in his house and he said, you want a drink? Sure. So he goes to his cabinet and takes out, he loves scotch. He took out the scotch bottle, poured a glass for him and a glass for me, put his glass back in the cabinet and walked off with the bottle in hand. And he said, what am I doing? He said, I'm getting owed. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think I kind of do that sort of thing too. So I started studying how people made errors. And that now comes to your part of the story, because I began to realize that there's all sorts of errors you make all the time.
Sure.
And it's often because things look the same. And almost every time you make an error, it's either, well, I made an error this morning. I wake up early in the morning at 5 o'clock, and I either go to work or I go and do my exercises. And it depends. So on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I exercise, and on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or the rest of the week, I go to work. So when I go to work, I put on my work clothes, right? When I go to exercise, I put on my shorts and my t-shirt. And this morning, I put on my work clothes and started to go out. And I said, oh no, we call that a capture error. And that people, you may have done it yourself. Every morning you get in your car and you drive to work. And
Sure.
then there's a holiday and you wake up and you get in your car and you drive to work. And maybe somewhere along the drive, you say, wait a minute, there's no work today. That's a capture error. You're used to doing it and you just do it without thinking. And
I drive home and I take my work keys out to open my home door. And then I have to turn back around and say, these aren't the keys I need. I need my house keys.
And that's because, I call that a description error, because the description of what you want works. It wasn't accurate enough. But you didn't take out your pencil and try to open the door. You took out a key. So the point is, you took out something that was relevant, but it was the wrong one.
Correct.
And
but it worries me, though. I mean, to some degree now, if you're going to say it that way, because, you think of Alzheimer's, you think of early dementia, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I starting to lose? Are these signs right now that I can't remember the right key to get out?
Well, one of the reasons that it's hard to detect dementia and Alzheimer's is because a lot of the errors that are caused by the disease are also the kind of errors we do every day.
Sure.
And so anyway, what happened was I wrote because I was an academic, and so I wrote lots of articles about error. And so I got called in when the nuclear power accident at 3 Mile Island happened, because the operators couldn't figure out what was going on. They made the wrong decisions. See, there are two kinds of errors. One of them is what we've been talking about, slips. I have in mind something to do, and I do the wrong thing. Now, those are the easy ones, because if I do the wrong thing, I know I discover it right away, just like you discovered those are the wrong keys. And those are the most common. But the other error is when you make the wrong decision. You decide to do something that's wrong. And that's hard, because then I'm always monitoring what kind of actions I do. And I'm doing the correct actions, but for the wrong purpose. And so at 3 Mile Island, we discovered that. First of all, they had the switches like engineers designed it, like 50 switches, all identical in a row with labels. And they wonder why people sometimes flip the wrong switch. Well, at least that's a slip, we call it. And that when you flip the wrong switch, you can see, the wrong light went on. And so you can correct it. But in this 3 Mile Island accident, a nuclear power plant has roughly 4,000 meters in controls and lights and indicators. 4,000. And every plant is different. And sometimes they put two plants together. In fact, most of the time they put two plants together. And quite often the engineers, to save wires, they make one the mirror image of the other. So if you learn the control positions on one plant, and you're now called in, hey, come on, we need some help on this side. It works the same way, but the controls are in different places.
Sure.
Of course there are errors. And in this case, what happened was that they understood what happened. They were running, they were doing some cleaning, and one of the valves stuck. And so they said, okay, let's open it up. And they flipped the switch. And guess what? The light went on above the switch. But turns out the light didn't say the valve had changed. The light said you would flip the switch.
Oh.
So they thought they did the right action. And from there on, as the plant got worse and worse, and it almost exploded, truly, they could never quite figure out what was going on. And it wasn't until they finally left and a new crew of people came in who didn't have any history yet of flipping the switches and so on. So they finally figured it out. And we said that the operators were very intelligent. They did the best thing they could, but the plant was badly designed. So that's what led me in this career and finally to write this book and to talk about it's not your fault.
When did the book come out?
This must have been in the early 1980s, I would guess. It was just, I wrote the papers a couple of years after 3 Mile Island. The first edition of the book was 1988, and this one is 2013. But I kept in the same chapter. But yeah, so that I make a living. In fact, people love it about talking about it's not your fault. It's the design.
Exactly. I'm curious, because we talked about the good thing about humans is we're ever evolving, but we still make mistakes. The system is still kind of flawed in a lot of different ways. Why is that?
Well, I have a feeling that way back when humans first evolved and were living in the forests or wherever, or in caves or whatever, I bet you they made errors.
Sure.
Different kind. But the same kind, fundamentally the same, except the technology was very different. The technology was limited to fire maybe, and to bows and arrows and spears, but not very much. They were just developing how to cook and what cooking would mean, etc. Yeah, I bet they made errors.
Do you think it's design flaws or is it leadership? Eventually.
Well, no, it's not. In this case, so why does a design flaw lead to an error? It's because your example of the keys is a really good one, because you can't blame the design of the keys. You can't. What do you blame? Nothing. The blame, in some sense, it is your fault, but it's not your fault. It's because when you're in a rush, you sort of, in your head, you don't realize this, but in your head, you sort of make an image or a description of what I need to open the door. And you did a shortcut. I need my keys. And so you pulled out your keys, except my keys is ambiguous. You have 2 sets of keys. So you pulled out the wrong one. And that's common. That's how the brain works. The brain doesn't over-specify. It's more, by not over-specifying, it's more flexible. So quite often, if I can't reach something, so I get a ladder. Well, there's no ladder, so I'll get a chair. Well, there's no chair. I'll get a big rock, or I'll get something else. And that's the power of the brain. But sometimes it leads you astray.
I'm curious about AI. That would be a topic that I would be interested to get your opinion on. Is that design going to make better humans?
I think so. But I think this is the most important technological revolution since the invention of writing. I really believe this is changing everything, because we've invented many tools that make us easier to do things. We have knives that we can cut things that we couldn't do otherwise. And we have things that make us smarter in a sense. I use a calculator instead of doing the arithmetic. And because when I do the arithmetic, I always make errors, especially if it's a complicated problem. But the calculator, so me and the calculator do arithmetic better, and using either algebra and calculus better. And cars make me faster, and tools make me stronger. But actually, that's not true. I'm not stronger. It's me and the tool that is stronger, and me and the calculator that is smarter. Not me, but the combination. Now, the new AI, the so-called generative AI, it generates answers, is not that kind of a tool. It's like a really smart person that knows everything, but doesn't have any real values, makes up things, is very naive about the world, but it's a wonderful collaborator. And so you could think of it as a collaborator. Look, I have a coffee maker. It's an espresso coffee maker, and it has 2 buttons. And one of those buttons keeps sticking. And every time it sticks, the coffee then keeps coming and overflows. And finally, I said, I've got to fix it. And I can't. And I tried to figure out how by looking at the machine, and I gave up. So I went to Claude, my AI, and I said, I have this Nespresso machine, and it has 2 buttons. One is for one, you have to hit one of them to get the water to heat up. And then when it's heated up, you push either the small button or the big button to get a small drink or a larger drink. And the larger is what I always want. And it sticks. How do I unstick it? And it came back and said, oh, well, which model do you have? And I told it which model I had. Said, oh, that's a well-known problem. It's really badly designed. It's because that switch is right over the hottest spot of it. And so there's a lot of steam that comes right up and it deposits all sorts of crap in the switch. And so the switch sticks. And so, so here's what you should do. You should just get some alcohol and you pour it in and you do this and et cetera. And then at the end, it also said, by the way, you'd be interested in this. I know you'd be interested in it, but knowing this is just bad design because the switch shouldn't have been put there. But even if it was there, if they would have put a little ridge around it to protect it, you wouldn't get the stickiness because this is a common problem. So I thought that was, but see what I mean? It's your assistant, it's a collaborator. Yeah. And it asked me more questions. And by the way, since I use it a lot, it knows who I am and what my background is. So that's why it said the affordances are wrong, which is a technical term I've introduced. And I use it for a lot of things, but what I have to do is I give it great explanations. I'm going on this podcast with Epic Mortgage. I don't know why I would go to a mortgage podcast. Can you tell me more about this? Who else does it? And what's it about? Et cetera. And
what did it say?
It gave me a good background about why you can enjoy it. It said it's not your normal audience, which is kind of nice. It's people who really get confused with life and tell them about it. And but it's going to take away jobs. Every new technology takes away jobs.
Sure.
Unless you learn how to use it. Learn how to use it for your job. You can use it for looking up backgrounds on your speakers or preparing questions in advance. You don't have to use them all. But in fact, that's the whole point. You don't use it as a tool. You don't say, give me the questions or write this for me. You say, I've been struggling with this and I need this information. What do you think? And then you do your thinking. You have that background and you're going to be better at whatever you want to do. Better at asking me questions, for example. And so I think no matter what your area is, you'll find that you can actually help me. I've started to, I get a lot of email and I get lots of appointments. And so I spend a lot of time putting it on my calendar. So I try to put all the information that's relevant. So I know, because if you look at my crowded email, I have a podcast with Dante. Who is he again? So it's inside I can read it to you just before I talk to you. But I say, hey, Claude, would you enter this email, when you enter the email content on the calendar at the proper day and time?
Oh, wow. I didn't know you could do that.
You can do that today.
That's nice. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm hoping that it'll make, we use AI quite often here for all purposes. And to your point, it feels like an assistant. It's something that we use as an assistant. What's funny is
a new assistant who isn't always accurate. So
yes. What's funny about the assistant is, there was an idea and thought that it would reduce the amount of things that you do, but I found it allowed me to do more things. So I feel more busy than ever before. So I'm curious as far as, you talk about like emotional design. Can you kind of elaborate on emotional design?
Yeah, there are different kinds of emotions. And a lot of people think design is making objects look pretty. And that's only a small part of design. In fact, I'm incapable of making an object look pretty. And as I tell my friends, it's really important that you know what you're good at. And when you have a job, try to find a job which is stuff you like to do and you're good at. But also it's important to know what you're not good at, because you may be in a job where what you're not good at is also very important. And that means one of two things. You either have to learn to do it and be good at it, or if you can't, make sure anytime you have to do something, you have somebody else who's good at that other thing to do for you. So I'm not good at making things attractive, but I'm good at making it understandable. So I make sure I always work in a team where there are other people who can do the rest. Now, I wrote a book about this, and I said there are basically three different kinds of emotions. It's a real simplification, but I said one of them is really fast, and it's you put your hand on a hot surface and you jerk it up because it's painful. And so one of those emotions is basically this very apt thing that lets you get through the life and not, if you stumble, it gives you you quickly try very hard not to fall down. And often you can prevent yourself from falling. Sometimes you do fall. But the point is, you notice that there was something wrong and you immediately start responding to it. The second one, basically, it's where we are most of the day is we're doing things and we have expectations. And if it's a positive thing, if we have a positive expectation, we feel good. And there's a positive emotion and you feel happy or satisfied or maybe sometimes smug. Hey, yeah, see, I did it right. And if it's a negative thing and it really does happen, then you can be depressed. And if there's a difference, you thought it was not going to work and it worked. And wow, I'm so happy. Or I had great plans for it and it fell through. That can depress me for the rest of the week even. And the problem is the highest kind of is reflection, where you go back over your past experiences and you rethink them. And that can lead to all sorts of problems in your life or happy times in your life. And you also then think ahead. And quite often, one of the problems is, after I've had a bad meeting with people, I find myself in the middle of the night making up conversations. And I really get even mad. I get more and more angry at the other people. And I finally have to stop myself and say, wait a minute, I'm now getting angry about things that they're saying in my dream. Oh, it isn't what they said. That isn't fair to the people.
Right.
And so the emotions really, we have two. I tell the people that the brain operates in two different ways. One is it tries to figure out decisions and control our body and control what we're doing and even thinking, but it's run by electrical signals among the nerves. Emotions are chemical. It's hormones that get released into the brain. And those hormones change the way the brain works. So when I was an executive, I was a vice president at Apple, and we designing a new product. I wanted people to be creative. So what we would do is we would bring the team in early in the morning. So this team is going to be with each other for the next year or two. These are big projects. But in the beginning, we come in every morning and we serve them donuts and food and have a good time, tell jokes, play a few games. And then we start be creative. And they're in a good mood. And when you're in a good mood, you're very easy distracted. And you're curious. So I'm talking to you and there's just a rabbit went outside the window.
Oh.
So it's curious, but it kind of destroys the conversation, as you can see. But it's it keeps me thinking about all sorts of new things, which is good, but I'm trying to be creative.
Sure.
And so you keep this going. And in fact, one of the rules of the game is that when someone makes an idea, do not criticize it. Even if you think it's horrible, don't criticize it. Either say nothing or say yes and then try to expand on the idea, maybe in a way that corrects some of the problems you have with it. It actually comes from improv's theater, where each person is told to say yes and afterwards. Okay. But now suppose we do that for a week and we finally settle on this is what we're going to build and this is how we're going to do it. Okay. Then I say, how much time do you need? Oh God, we're going to need a whole year to do this. We have to get it out in 10 months, I say. You have 10 months. Because I want them to be stressed. Not very much stress. If you're too much stressed, you can't do anything.
Sure.
Just a little bit stressed. If you're stressed, what happens is you get tunnel vision. Which means you're focused. And that's what I want. Because when I'm actually doing the work, I do not want people to say, oh, I've been thinking about it again. Let's redo it. I think we have a different idea. No, it's too late. This is going to take, we have 100 people working on this project. It's going to take a year to finish. Actually, it's going to take you 10 months to finish. And so we can't go back and forth. So, so just the amount of stress to keep you focused. So I don't say, ooh, a rabbit.
Yeah. I'm curious. Did you learn these tactics dealing with Steve Jobs? Is that where you learned all this from?
No, actually, I was at Apple between jobs. That's a joke. I got there just after he left. I worked for John Scully and CEOs after that, worse and worse CEOs. And finally, Jobs came back and he said, Apple's in real bad shape. And so I'm going to start all over again. And this is I don't know that he said this, but this is what I tell myself. And he said to himself, I'm not going to waste my time looking at all the people and deciding who's the good ones and who are the bad ones. So executives, vice presidents, you're all gone. Goodbye.
Wow.
Well, no, he saved the company. And I was in charge of research and doing all sorts of wonderful things, which even went into the newer Apples that he built. But when a company is in trouble, it can't afford a research division. So I understood that. And so I called up my friends at Microsoft and at Xerox and IBM. And everybody got a job immediately.
Sure.
Usually at a higher salary. And I had a new idea for a new book. I wanted to write it, but so many people wanted to hire me. I finally had to take a job to stop them from bothering me. So, Apple had gotten itself into a bad situation and didn't know how to get out of it.
Understood. I'm also curious if you had an opportunity to redesign something, a system that's flawed, what would it be?
The economic system of the world. The fact that everybody looks for short-term gains instead of long-term success. And we look at profits and sales as opposed to you shouldn't look at it. I want people to have the most important thing to do is to improve the quality of life of the people who buy our products or services. And we don't look at that. We look at sales. What do we have to do to make them sell more? In fact, so one of the things we do is you make it so that your cell phone only lasts about 2 years or 3, and your computer might last 4, and your car, well, we would prefer that you buy a new car every 5 years, but we might even let you go for 7 or 8 years. Why? It's not good for the world. It's not good for the climate, not good for the environment. But I want to go after people's quality of life. And that's actually what I'm spending my time now. I now am in part of a charity that's named after me. It's a Don Norman Design Award. And we look for people who are doing really good, helping communities. And they have to have evidence that what they've done is really helping the community. And it means you don't design something for the community. People don't like it when you do something. I do something and I say, hey, here's something wonderful for you. No, we learn to work with them and work with people from the community, and they have different problems. Maybe they don't have clean water. Maybe the schooling is inefficient, or they can't get to school. There's no transportation. So we work together because they know what their problems are, and they even have ideas for solutions. So my goal is to have people help them reach their own solutions, because then they're happy.
That's awesome. Don, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending time with me today if you could, what would be one message that you want to leave the audience? Something that you wanted to share and make sure that they understand. What would it be?
Well, aside from it's not your fault, it's bad design. I've always been a maverick, that I see things differently than other people. And so that means, and it helps because I came from a different field. So I've changed my field many times. I was an engineer, and then a psychologist, and then a cognitive scientist, and then an industry executive, and now I'm a designer. But each time I learn something different, and I can apply it to the next. And so it's really good if you either hire people with different backgrounds, or yourself, if you've moved from area to area and changed different jobs over time, don't apologize for it. Take advantage of the fact. Maybe you were digging ditches, but you learn a lot about digging ditches and why you're digging ditches and what the teamwork is required to do that. You could apply that to anything else. And so my goal is that you should be somewhat of a maverick. Don't accept the way things are. Don't look at the way, don't ever accept the fact that we've always done it this way. When somebody says, you say, why are you doing it that way? And they say, we've always done it this way. That's an opportunity to make things better, to change. What happened? What would happen if we did it differently? Take a look at all the great big innovations we've had in almost any field. It's when somebody thought of doing it differently.
Don, thank you. And I want you to have an epic day.
An epic day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.